That was an excerpt from Saliva Milkshake by Howard Brinton, a play about someone who assassinates the Home Secretary of England, Wales and Ireland. And next we have this small offering from Genet. Violence and life are more or less synonymous. The grain of wheat which germinates and breaks through the frozen soil, the beak of the chick which cracks the eggshell, the fertilization of the female and the birth of the young can all be accused of being violent. Yet no one would put on trial the child, the woman, the chick, the bud, or the grain of wheat. The charges brought against the Red Army faction and the trial of its violence are real enough. But Germany, accompanied by the rest of Europe and America, are trying to fool themselves, and the trial against the violence is precisely what that brutality consists of. The greater the brutality and the more demeaning the trial, the more violence becomes imperative and necessary. The more destructive the brutality, the more the violence which is life will require heroism. As Andreas Baader has said, force is an economic power. We owe it to Andreas Baader, to Ulrich Meinhof, to Holger Mainz, to the Red Army faction in general, to have made us understand, not only by their words, but by their actions, outside and inside prison, that only violence can stop human brutality. More or less unconsciously, everyone knows that behind these two words, trial and violence, is hidden a third one, brutality, the brutality of the system.
It is a question of finding out whether innocence, the moment it begins to act, can avoid committing murder. We can only act in our own time among the people who surround us. We shall be capable of nothing until we know whether we have the right to kill our fellow beings or the right to let them be killed. Since all contemporary action leads to murder, direct or indirect.
Since all contemporary action leads to murder, direct or indirect.
Since all contemporary action leads to murder, direct or indirect, we cannot act until we know whether and why we have the right to kill.
3 million people have left the land in the past 25 years, but 2 million are still dependent on agriculture for their living, or part of it, and produce food worth 20,000 million marks a year. There's been enormous investment in machinery, and smaller farms have tended to merge into larger and more efficient units. West German farmers wouldn't be farmers if they didn't complain, but there's still a long way to go before the country's agriculture reaches the peak of productivity known to be possible. Meanwhile, housewives pay some of the highest prices in the world for food, while a lot of smallholders can only survive financially by having another job away from the farm.
How it all began. We'd lived with violence from the time we were children. It has material roots. On payday, when the old man comes home drunk and beats up the old lady, it's all that stuff. At school, you get into scrapes. You have to make your way with sticks. For you, that's a perfectly normal thing. You fight at your workplace, you fight in bars. You have a more healthy relationship.
West Germany has more lignite or brown coal than it knows what to do with, and its value to the economy has risen significantly since the oil crisis. The Federal Republic will remain heavily dependent on imported oil as its main source of energy for the rest of the century. But a research program aimed at finding alternative sources was set up in 1973 with a budget of 250 million marks. One obvious alternative is nuclear energy, which is being developed rapidly in West Germany, one of the world's leaders in this great new technology. Technological know-how is also being maintained and developed in space research, both in purely national projects and in those being undertaken in cooperation with other countries. On the division of Germany after the Second World War, the Federal Republic was formed from the western half of the former Reich. Liberal democracy was adopted with the encouragement of the Western Allies. Here we see the Federal Chancellor, Helmut Schmidt, West Germany's fifth head of government. addressing the Bundestag, or Parliament.
In einer Zeit weltweit wachsender Probleme konzentrieren wir uns.
nhân dân ta nhất hoàn toàn thắng lợi. Đế quốc Mỹ nhất định rút khỏi nước ta, tổ quốc ta nhất định sẽ thống nhất, đồng bào Nam Bắc nhất định sẽ sum họp một nhà.
Smoke bomb placed among the wreaths around the cenotaph marked the start of Sydney's Anzac Day parade this morning. The march celebrates the defeat of Anzac troops at Gallipoli on the Turkish peninsula in the First World War. Hidden in a wreath, the bomb, attached to an alarm clock, had been timed to explode at 9 a.m, the scheduled start of the march. Fire and smoke billowed from the massive cenotaph wreaths while the first cars carrying disabled veterans were approaching the shrine. Two Rover Scouts on guard gallantly rushed forward and tried to douse the bomb with their hats. The wanton act of desecration angered the people at the scene, particularly the young veterans returned from Australia's most recent defeat in Indochina. Thousands watching on television the proud march of the 25,000 ex-servicemen and women jammed switchboards in protest.
Right. About 2 minutes to 9, when the people were in position, we were waiting in the crowd, right, to wait for the big event. You see, we'd stuck this connection to the hour hand of the clock so that when it hit a drawing pin, it'd go off. But because of the size of the connection and the vague inaccuracy in the hour hand, you can never be exactly sure how close to the mark you're going to be, right? Anyway, at about 2 minutes to 9, this old lady breaks out from the crowd, right? She's carrying this wreath. You know, she's late or something, and the whole area's been cleared. And we're waiting for the ceremony to start. She bends over to put down a wreath. And then, boom! No old lady, right? Smoke clears, she's gone. No, well, not really. We didn't blow her up, but well, that's like the last thing we needed. You can imagine we're just sitting there packing it. But she got away, went back to the crowd, and then it all went as planned.
Read that back, would you, Rob?
There are traces of refined oils common to oil paints, such as a would-be artist would use. The corrosion of the surrounding wreath and explosive container, polystyrene, makes the establishment of the subject painted on the base 4 centimetres rag card unidentifiable. The trigger device was an electrical circuit with 2 AA pen lights through a diamond brand alarm clock, commonly available, made in the People's Republic of China.
add a conclusion to that. Check all art institutions. The UA were stroke R. No, RE. Come on, pal. That were are artists.
I'm gonna take 2 weeks, gonna have a fine vacation. I'm gonna take my problem to the United Nations. Sometimes I wonder what I'm gonna do, but there ain't no cure for the summertime blues.
What, a cop? Yeah. Okay, well, thanks. Yeah, I'll contact you. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Probable reasons for positive telephone interception. Telephone conversation from institution 109 in file 8765 comes up possible positive response due to either high paranoia or wary of surveillance due to involvement in ANZAC bombing. Art Humanities, Institution 109. Paranoia without foundation.
What?
For example, use of illegal drugs is within 25%. Background information collected concerning Institution 109 and photographic information obtained within the vicinity shows likelihood of involvement 75%. Detailed information on workers and users being compiled.
Italians have always seemed to take their politics to the streets. Politics of the right, left, and center. Today, street politics have taken a dirty turn. Fascists on the right are shooting communists on the left. Communists on the left are shooting fascists on the right. Communist terrorists are also shooting Communist Party members who work within the existing democratic system. Of these terrorists, right or left, few shoot to kill. They shoot to cripple. They shoot at the knees, and they shoot at the groin. If you disagree, they shoot. They shoot journalists. They shoot judges. They shoot politicians and kidnap industrialists. The innocent get caught in the crossfire. There are more such terrorist incidents in Italy than in any other country in the world. This recent violence in the streets is a part of everyday life in Rome and northern Italy. It is creating such discord that no government seems able to maintain order, justice, or the trust of its citizens.
Of course, that is not the end of it. The update is the kidnapping of Aldo Moro. With a report of that, we return to Claire Sterling in London.
On March 16th, Italy witnessed the most daring and brutal act of terrorism in her post-war history, when 5 police bodyguards were mown down and top statesman Aldo Moro was kidnapped in a brilliantly planned commando-style coup. The Marxist Red Brigade struck at the heart of the Italian state on the very day that a new government was seeking a parliamentary vote of confidence from a majority which included the support of the Communist Party for the first time in 30 years. Christian Democrat Aldo Moro was the architect of this momentous Catholic-Communist alliance. The Red Brigade's leaders are in jail, and their founder, Renato Curcio, is on trial for armed conspiracy and murder. But their avowed struggle in Europe's ultimate war for communism, as they call it, continues with mounting ferocity. In spite of unprecedented security precautions in the court, jurors are being threatened and policemen gunned down. Now, the Red Brigades are offering Moro's life for release of the terrorists. What kind of people have challenged the very existence of the Italian state? Professor Franco Ferrarotti of the University of Rome.
It seems to us that all of a sudden they've discovered politics, and they play politics tragically, dramatically, I would even say criminally, of course, just like a game. They do not have the patience of going through the procedures. They don't know, they do not have the knowledge very probably, and I think they smell, this seems to be typical of their behavior, their motivation, they smell a kind of a fraud in all the democratic procedures. This interesting thing is that the terrorists in Italy have been able to mobilize and to make an alliance, as I said, and to get the cooperation of the common criminals. Therefore, it's very difficult to pin them down. I think the organization is certainly very loose. It's interchangeable. You cannot hit them, once for all. That's why even when they're, the so-called chief, the most important one, a young man named Renato Curcio was put in jail, people thought that finally the thing was over. They were wrong. Why? Because, for instance, you have Red Brigades in the north, NAP, which means Armed Proletariat Nuclei in the south, and then you have many other abbreviations, but they're all, in the end, they all converge on the idea that violence is a legitimate method for political action.
Have lunch, go back in the afternoon, providing the conductor doesn't wake you up for your afternoon cup of tea, and have another sleep. Wake up in time for tea.
So it's kind of relaxation.
Oh, yes. It's surprising
as the
amount
cases
of people,
necessary violence are innumerable, so are the acts of brutality. Since brutality is always used to answer violence. Brutality therefore takes the most unexpected forms.
The crews apparently led a very hard life. They had tents on the side of the line. All the rails and so forth all had to be brought out by camel. And it was a very hard life from what they tell me.
Just as the cases of necessary violence are innumerable, so are the acts of brutality, since brutality is always used to answer violence. Brutality therefore takes the most unexpected forms, not readily identified as brutality. The architecture of council housing, bureaucracy, the replacing of words, proper names and others by numbers, the priority given in traffic to speed over the slowness of pedestrians, the authority of the machine over the person who works it, codified laws prevailing over customs, the quantity of increase of punishments, the use of secrecy to dissimulate knowledge which is of general interest, gratuitous blows in police stations, the insults of police towards those with coloured skins, obsequious bows when a tip is left, an irony of obscenities when it isn't, the goose step, the bombing of Haiphong, the £50,000 Rolls Royce. Naturally, no list can exhaust the facts which are like so many forms in which brutality is imposed. All the spontaneous violence of life, which is extended by revolutionary violence, will be just enough to end organised brutality.
We only have a single track, and we must slow down, go into a siding, and wait for the other trains to go by, and backwards and forwards every year to Perth from Sydney.
On the train?
On the Indian Pacific. Yes, the thing is that I normally fly over to Perth during the year, and for a holiday, this is a complete
to seriously look at US development of the same kind of weapons and the best way of deploying them. According to John Stackhouse, writing in the Australian Bulletin, a top US Defence Department figure is quoted as saying that particle beam weapons could be actually deployed within only a couple of years. Well, what's the significance of it, if there is any? Well, it seems they'd be invaluable as anti-missile systems in space. Spy satellites that already monitor for missile launches would track the rockets they took off from their launching pads. These same spy satellites would fire beams of energy close.
As photographs give people an imaginary possession of a past that is unreal, they also help to take possession of a space in which they are insecure. Thus, photography develops in tandem with one of the most characteristic of modern activities, tourism. For the first time in history, large numbers of people regularly travel out of their habitual environments for short periods of time
seems positively unnatural to travel for pleasure without taking a camera along. Photographs will offer indisputable evidence that the trip was made, that the program was carried out, that fun was had.
Thought I told you that. Suspect 109B, travelling Sydney-Perth, India Pacific. Expected time of arrival, 7:30 a.m. Friday. Photographs of all possible suspects on train in process at the moment.
Hello, Mum.
Who's that?
It's Ray.
What's this? Where are you?
I'm at the station.
Huh?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you are a surprise.
How are you?
I'm fine. Are you?
Yeah, pretty good.
Oh, that's great to have you home.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Hmm?
You should have let me know.
Oh, I was in a bit of a hurry, you know.
Were you?
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, I'll come in and meet you.
Okay. Oh, how's Mary?
Oh, she's well. Very well. Everybody's well.
Yeah, both of them okay?
Yes, everybody. We'll look forward to seeing you again in a few minutes, and you'll have to give me time to get dressed and half asleep.
Alright, sorry to wake you up, yeah.
That's all right.
Okay, well, I'll just wait outside the front of the station then.
All right. It'll take me about half an hour.
Yeah, that's fine. I've got to get my baggage and things like that.
Yes, all right. Good. I'll be there. That'll be lovely.
Alright.
Okay.
Great. See ya.
Computer's information from photo booth source number 1307 Central Station, Sydney. We had to take a lot of photos, could not match verbal description. This Italian comes about as close as we can get. Let's feed that guy's statistics into Devac. Keep him under surveillance, get his family information about him, family background, etc.
Retention play. West Rail's Hyden Road bus service via Corrigan and Continental. The prospect is visitors to the terminal are requested to remain over the platform.
Ray, it's great to have you home, but, you know, I'm really surprised.
Yeah, well, I sort of was in a bit of a hurry. I didn't sort of contact you. Sorry about that, but, you know.
Well,
it's just good to be here.
Yeah, great. What was the hurry?
I got into a bit of trouble up in Sydney, I suppose. Just wanted to get away from it for a while.
Oh, well.
Have you been reading the papers lately?
Well, I read them, you know. I don't know whether I read everything. Why?
You better stay in the left lane. Well, did you read about some people that blew up the ANZAC War Memorial?
Yes, I did read that. Why? What's happening now?
Well...
I did read about that.
Yeah.
Why, you didn't have anything to do with it, did you?
Well, I suppose I did, Mum.
Ray, why?
Oh, I don't know. I've got my reasons for it, and I'd like to talk to you about them when we get home, but not just now. I wouldn't mind catching up on what's been happening out here. I mean,
the family are going to be too happy about that?
I know. I was going to talk to you about that. But I had to tell you, you know.
Yes, well, of course.
I mean, we could tell Mary, but I don't think we could tell anybody else.
Back to the country where I was born and raised, and country cooking is the best part of the day. I love the rich aromas, it's goodness you can't beat, and Maggie makes the play.
Can't imagine you being much good at soccer, Ray. Well, football's your game, or used to be. I think Jack's going to be the soccer star of the family.
Yeah.
Oh,
8:11.
8:11.
Ray, what do you feel like eating?
I don't know, what have we got?
Got a chicken and some eggplant.
Well, yeah, that'd be great. I could help you make something with the eggplant.
Yes, well, what about that eggplant dish you used to do? Could you do that?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Maybe you can show me how to do it.
Okay.
Have you been making many curries?
I'll give you a hand.
Will you? Great.
Yeah, great. You want to show me how to do it?
Yes. Do you think it'd be any good telling you the recipe? Think
Yeah.
you'd ever do it?
Oh, yeah, I should imagine I would.
Well, you have 2 pounds of wholemeal flour and 2 ounces of this compressed yeast, which you crumble up like this in the middle, and then you put on it 2 dessertspoonfuls of honey, which makes the yeast rise. The yeast needs sweetness of some sort. So you put that on, and on that you put a cup of water, which is tepid or, warm.
Yeah.
And like that. And then you leave it for about 10 minutes. And while you're doing that, I normally grease this.
Okay, well, I'll do that.
You do that, you take that and shake it and spray it up. Oh, it's some newfangled, easy method for greasing. And in here, around the edge, you put 2 tablespoonfuls of salt. This is more than most people put, actually, but I like a lot of salt.
Mm.
And
how long does it take?
it only takes an hour from the time you start. That is, if you don't have a lot of telephone calls and people coming to the door and all that sort of thing,
I always thought it took much longer to make bread.
Well, it used to take all day and all night.
Well, how come this is different?
Well, it's a new sort of yeast.
Revolutionary new yeast.
Yes, that's right. It's a revolutionary way of making bread, and it makes it really available to anybody and everybody to make.
Ray Unit, 4th son of Charles David and Elsie Joan Unit, born Western Australia, 10/11/52. This could be useful to West Australians. Give them something to take the pressure off the trouble over the new law that requires police permission for public meetings.
You hungry?
Yeah, I'm quite hungry, actually.
Ray, what about you pouring a drink?
Yeah.
You all have some corned beef?
No, thanks.
Metti a campare, Roma nostra, Roma mia, che se vanno porta via per Campidoglio con San Pietro, già lo stanno a combinare. Qui se vanno, venne tutto, cielo sole d'aria fresca, ma la fava romanesca gliela volevo rigare. regala, ma la fava romanesca gliela volevo regalare.
Excuse me, miss, do you reckon, could you tell me the way to North Cottesloe Beach, please?
What do you think you're doing?
I'm repossessing my image.
Stealing my property.
Property is theft.
What are you so afraid of?
Do you really want to know?
Yeah.
All right, I'll tell you. To photograph people is to violate them. Oh, shit, you've done it again.
Listen, you shouldn't be so afraid. Let's have a look at this picture. I mean, what does it tell me about you?
It tells me more than I want you to know.
Doesn't tell me anything. Look, you've got your sunglasses on. I can't... It's so cool, so unrevealing. Obviously, you've got things to hide.
Like a car, a camera is sold as a predatory weapon. One that's as automated as possible, ready to spring. Popular taste expects an easy and invisible technology. It's as simple as turning the ignition key or pulling the trigger.
Cars kill more than guns, and guns kill more than cameras. In fact, cameras don't kill at all.
Still, there's something predatory in the act of taking a picture. Just as the camera is a sublimation of the gun, to photograph someone is a sublimated murder, a soft murder.
Well, maybe people will learn to act out their aggressions with cameras instead of guns.
Still, to photograph people is to violate them by seeing them as they have never seen themselves, by having knowledge of them that they can never have. Turns people into objects which can be symbolically possessed.
I think it is possible to use the camera as a tool of aggression. For example, with getting back at sexist advertising. I was once in a situation where I was in the studio and somebody showed me this picture out of a Playboy magazine. It was worse than a Playboy magazine. It was one of those really extreme girly magazines. And he held up this picture to me and showed me, and it was just a centerfold of a girl with her legs spread open. You're not aware of the girl, you're just aware of the legs and what's between them. And I was really affronted. I didn't know how to react at the time. And I went away fuming and thinking, how can I get back at this person? And I thought, well, one way is to do a role reversal to get a man to sit into that same situation. Do you want to see the picture?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
With that relationship between observer and observed, and the fact that it's irreversible, you know, that you can't have, I mean, you can on one level reduce men to being objects. But you don't sell men like that. I mean, you don't sell men in that way in patriarchal society, you know, do you? I mean, women are the things that are exchanged, you know, women are the objects, women are the things bought and sold.
Well, when you sell men, you sell them as patriarchs, you know.
Yeah.
They all look very noble and clothed.
Yeah.
And
which is
in
why
control.
a reversal of this isn't men in that position.
It's like you're holding your face up, not like heroic pose.
Lannon, you're looking too far. That's better. Sort of your left arm sort of towards your side, just hanging. Ian, you're looking in that direction, sort of over there.
Up in the air.
Yeah. With your mouth open. Peter, you're lying with your head and your hair flowing back. That sort of thing. That's right, that's perfect. But your arm's supposed to be like that.
We need an action against the people, not property, an act of aggression. Something that's going to win a lot of sympathy from the media for the against what he does. So that it should be against an act against people rather than property, of course. Acting against property, some people support that sort of thing. They feel, you know, people have got a lot, or building being blown up doesn't make much difference. Individual, they're quite a different matter. That's then the media can get right behind it. It's a human story. Now, how can we move into that direction? We could republicize the Anzac Day bombing, show it as a brutal act of terror which luckily failed, rather than the anti-war protest thing the papers made it out to be. Simple things, boosted by the press, built them up. But it's important to keep them identified as an individual person.
I mean, the whole thing about images is that it depends on the context that they're shown in, whether you have any real effect or not. I mean, I've become really frustrated with the gallery context because the way most people see photography in a gallery is in an art context, and they're not looking for a political statement of any kind. In fact, they resist it. They're afraid of it. In press photography, there's a lot of power in words. I mean, the title of the newspaper influences the way people feel about the images. It's interesting how, with the woodchip thing, that different newspapers have given different emphases to the...
One just says woodchip bomb blast, and the other one says... What's the other one say?
The other one says bomb fails to work.
I brought Paul around to talk to you about that woodchip stuff.
Yes, I want to do a story. I want to take some pictures to do with the woodchipping.
Oh, great.
And Ray said that you know someone who was involved in the bombing.
Well, there were two guys involved, Fudge and Johnny Chester, Fred Hubbershon. And they lived down in Manjimup, where a lot of wood chipping was happening. And they went up to Perth and stole a lot of dynamite from Bunnings, which is it's a big timber company, you know, big old West Australian family and everything. Moneyed. And they came back to Manjimup and they had some land where they had a little humpy right out in the bush and no one knew where it was. And they hid the dynamite for about 6 months before they did anything. And when they eventually did the bombing, they took great measures that no one was going to be hurt and put these signs up along the road, danger, detour, blasting, right. And when they got to the place, there was a guard there, so they very nicely asked him to sort of be careful, and they tied him up and put him in the car and things. Yeah. And they had 2 bombs. They had a small bomb and a large bomb, which had a clock detonator. And the small bomb went off first, and in the blast, the clock got blown off, and the large bomb didn't go off. And so that the impact of the bombing was much smaller than they had anticipated. Right. And they eventually got arrested after a couple of months by a guy who was very drunk and knew they'd done it. A lot of people knew they had done it because of the bad feeling around the area and everything.
A lot of people wished they'd done it.
Yeah.
Themselves.
Well, a lot of people talked about doing it, but no one actually ever got around to it. And then they were remanded for 8 months, and when their trial came up, the state appealed, and they got 4 years, and the judge was Judge Burke.
That's a heavy sentence.
Yeah, and he really stressed. He said, you know, these guys are terrorists, and we're going to suppress them. We're not going to let it happen in our golden state of Western Australia, you know, and really played it up.
At the proper time and in the proper place, in the proper manner, I could get away with murder with this one on. See, like, the same time that happened, there was a case of some right-wing union bashers threw a Molotov cocktail at the TLC leader's home, like, you know, and they also threatened the life of 2 other unionists. And they got something like a fine of $900.
$900.
Property and, you know,
that was it.
Murder.
And that
was a murder attempt, and the other one was on property, and they get sort of, you know, 5 years. You know, one's a a right-wing sort of acting and on sort of
Yeah.
left-wing thing. It's just amazing.
But it's lovely to see all the family again.
What were you trying to
Sort of
exactly,
blowing-
what was the message
It
you were
wasn't even
trying to
blowing
get
it up,
through?
it was just a smoke bomb. It's
What-
to sort of bring, I mean, like, there's a whole pile of Vietnam veterans and people like that were there.
Hmm.
I mean, like, just to sort of,
Do you think that people understood that?
oh, yeah. I mean, you know, it's pretty obvious what was done and why it was done.
See, I feel that it loses you a lot of sympathy among the people who you really want support from.
But a smoke bomb just isn't violent, you know, it's just a practical joke. Ultimately, if a change has to come about, it is either violence or the threat of violence that brings it about.
Well, that's in the past, you know.
Yeah, today, no, right here and now. You know, whether you take political pressures or unions, that ultimately it's the threat of violence or actual violence that brings about the change, irrespective of the size of that group.
Well, you know, while we've got the democratic government and we've got arbitration, we've got all these things that are supposed to do away with violence. Why don't they work?
Oh, because you get a minority group that doesn't agree with it. Hence you get terrorism.
No, no, it's not a minority group. Terrorism isn't sort of something which is employed by a minority group. Terrorism is often the only means possible.
That's right, it's a last resort.
Yeah, but to a majority of people that have a different idea to the minority of people who have all the guns and weapons. I mean, you know, like, if you're, sort of take Timor, for example, I mean, they were invaded by sort of a much larger sort of
But you're
more
assuming,
superior army. No,
you're assuming that the majority are right, inverted commas.
Well,
let's assume the minority have the better ideal.
Oh, okay, well, in the
as
minority...
opposed to a dictatorship.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that doesn't work like that politically. Like, sort of, people that are going to be sort of willing to sort of put some violence into what they want to get out of, you know, what they want society to end up like.
The problem is that
you don't run in with a bomb and throw it. You've got to sort of work things out, you know.
If the minority are thought to be morally wrong, they're terrorists. If the minority are thought to be morally right, they're crusaders. Yeah, right. And both of which, you know, use violence to get their end across.
Well, I mean, it's just a matter of who sees them as terrorists.
That's
they
right.
Might be seen as, the PLO aren't seen as terrorists by the majority of Lebanese and Palestinian people. They're seen as sort of liberators. They're called liberators. They're freedom fighters. They're not sort of terrorists.
What I don't
as
like
far
about
as those people are concerned.
Ray, though, really is that so many innocent people suffer in these...
No one is innocent.
Yes, are there innocent people, just non-tactful people?
I mean, if you're an apathetic person that doesn't have anything, doesn't do anything, you know, politically, you know, it doesn't mean you're innocent, it just means you're apathetic.
No, don't tell us.
What's your opinion?
My opinion of what? My opinion of what?
Of setting bombs for
Well, if you blow up the Palace Hotel, I'm all for it. What else do you want to blow up?
I don't know. I don't see. No, I have not known it's really
necessarily need to have a war.
Of course not. It is
That
not.
analogy isn't quite right. Now, if you use that as your analogy, that you need a war, you know, to sort of...
I've never seen people be able to tick otherwise.
Family unit. 4 Deacon Street, Swanbourne, Western Australia. Suburban Perth. Charles, David and Elsie Joan, known as Joy Unit, formerly Corinia, Cundanin, 100 miles east on Kalgoorlie Pipeline from Perth. Children, 4 boys, 2 girls. Call significant geographic locations. Division of Unit Farm, Cundanin, 1962, on death of father. Widow Joy Unit moved to Perth with 4 younger units. File 109876. LJ and K Unit, Bala, Barbinu, Farm. More wheat than sheep. Let's codename this project More Meat Than Wheat. License number, driving license number, insurance numbers, credit union affiliations, club membership, sporting associations, such as country women's associations, local football teams, etc., membership of parents and teachers associations, got here an individual middle-class background and interests, attracted by theatre and art, of undefined politics, wears an anarchist button, red and black, cool, removed, but more alienated from his family, a strong cosmetic relationship to his image, possible homosexual tendencies, refer file 5432, aim for provocations and surveillance of possible terror incidents.
I'm sick and tired of walking down the street of apathy. I'm sick and tired of apologies on every face I see. I don't know the reason why you sit there on your knees. I don't know the reason why you bow and beg to please. I only know the season is of softly rotting leaves. Australia, your god is apathy. Australia, your god is apathy. I've had enough of wading through knee-deep hypocrisy. I've had enough of needing someone else just to be. I don't know the reason why your voice just talks to please. I don't know the reason why you skulk between the trees. I only know the grieving of a land that cannot see. Australia, your god is apathy. Australia, your god is apathy. You can't tell me this life we lead is predetermined fate.
Hello. How are you?
Good to see you. How's the
Good day.
cup going?
Yeah, long time since I've seen you.
Good to see you again. This is Paula.
Good day, Paula. How are you?
This is the farm.
We've got about 8,000 acres.
How's the acreage divided up?
We crop ourselves about 2,500 acres, and we've got share farmers who crop about 1,500 acres. There's still some of it bush, and there's still, the rest just...
It's like the acreage that you've got's all under wheat, or you run sheep as well, don't you?
Yeah.
Above their sort of economic worth.
Yeah.
It's economic anyway.
Yeah, it is economic from the point of view that you get it back in your crops, but you just can't judge exactly what it is.
How many do you run?
Right. We've got about 2,000 at the moment. We've had up to about 4,000 before we had these couple of droughts.
Do you think you'll build up the herd again?
Oh yes, gradually build it up. But the sheep are the wheat are the main thing. It's the biggest part of our income.
Why do you run sheep?
Oh, good to run. They help you with your wheat crops. They make it. It's hard to explain, really. I suppose that you can't really grow good crops without them. They keep the weeds down and all that sort of thing. And
so they benefit this sort of soil, really.
It's pretty hard to put figures on what sheep are actually worth, but it's hard to. You get so much for the wool and so much for the ones you sell, but I think they're worth more than that. They're worth, they can sense it when you bring them in. They know once they come in through here. They're just a small mob, and they know that just about every time they come in, one of them's not going to go back. Right, well, first you just get him down and put your foot in between his legs here, like that. Then you get your knee in behind his head, and you feel for his windpipes. I don't have to really feel for it because I just stick the knife straight in there. It's got to go behind the windpipe. You bring the knife straight out through his windpipe and break it, cut it. He starts to kick a bit then, of course. Then you've got to whip his neck right back, break the neck, and as you do, you cut in through there, which severs his spinal cord, and he's finished. He'll kick a bit, but he's finished. You've got to get his spinal cord cut pretty quickly. That's the... If you want him not to suffer too much, that's the thing. As soon as his spinal cord...
As soon as you break it back, you've got to
he's
cut
gone.
It right through.
Straight out. You haven't got it enough.
Is that right?
Yeah, you'll bloody die eventually, I think. Just move your boot a bit, yeah? Out of the road. No, you haven't broken his neck, that's the trouble.
Do you want to do it?
Just hop your foot out of the road, because you're getting blood all over it. You'll eventually die. Do you want me to slip in and do it, or what?
Yeah, do it.
Hey, that's the braking. It's pretty heavy back. Kick a bit now, so hop out of there. Not too bad. Shouldn't have that old spin behind it, I suppose. What do you want with him?
Oh, I'm just moving him at the side a bit.
Okay, it's a method of learning, you know. Pretty hard to do on first day.
Been buying them. Because you don't know the age of them.
Something like that, John.
The President was told the situation is stable and assured that if there were changes, new hazards, there would be time to implement emergency plans. Yesterday, radiation levels had dropped in the control room. Today, safety engineers monitoring the radiation said it was almost nil in the area. Then back to Middletown's Borough Hall, the President praised local officials and then, without actually using the word, referred to what everyone here has been thinking about for days, evacuation.
Nuclear power stations have cost more than $100 billion since the first plant was built at Shippingport, Pennsylvania in the 50s. Chairman Lewis Strauss of the Atomic Energy Commission said nuclear electricity would be so cheap, no more meters would be needed. Under the AEC and its successor, the NRC, the federal government has spent about $17 billion on nuclear power. A spokesman for the nuclear industry, Mr. Hart, chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Nuclear Regulation.
It's my intention to request a complete and thorough and hard-hitting investigation of the entire incident from stem to stern.
If we learn nothing else from the nuclear accident, we've learned that the safety problems are much greater than we ever thought.
Anarchism
and
and
our
left
inability to cope
adventurous
with a nuclear emergency became clear.
terrorism, given the time between the end of the Vietnam War and now in Australia, happening to a male from Western Australia, who was trained as an artist in an art school to be an individualistic, idiosyncratic egotist. Work on him, see, maybe he's not suitable for this experiment. There's trouble, he's had trouble with his family, living away from home, more alienated from them, difference in background. Would introduce him to people, of course. After all, there's a lot of detail, technical stuff he won't know how to do. He'll very likely like the idea of seeing himself as a romantic figure playing God, but won't know how to carry it out. So we'll have to, he'll need a bit of instruction to people who can train him. He must be kept isolated. He must be kept the romantic cynic he is. We can build up the aspects in the press, turn him into a terrorist, outlaw him, strengthen his terrorist tendencies.
Yeah, I'd like to return to these, please.
Mr. Ray Units, Prince Leonard.
Prince Leonard?
I'd like to seek political asylum here in your province.
Yes, certainly. We'll look into that now. Firstly, now, could you tell me why it is, what reason that you require the asylum?
Well, I got into a bit of trouble in Sydney. Declared war on myself a bit. Let off a bomb at the ANZAC Memorial.
Oh, yes.
In protest against the Vietnam situation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And, well, I don't know how you feel about that sort of thing.
Yes, well, a year ago we also had some troubles with the Commonwealth, and we did declare war on them. I would consider that there's a little bit of, or mainly perhaps, political issue involved in what you're mentioning to me. And if it is political, then certainly you can have political asylum. So what I'd be certainly willing to do is to give you temporary political asylum until such time as we've investigated whether the aspects of political or criminal. But it certainly seems political to me, and there's been no request made to us by the Commonwealth Government as at this moment for your extradition, and you've already received your visa, so you are legally in this country, and until such time as there is a request made to us by the Commonwealth Government for your extradition, you have political asylum in here. And if such a request for extradition is made, we will then look into it to see whether it is simply a political reason or criminal. And whilst it remains political, you have our political asylum.
So, I have political asylum, temporarily.
And we're very pleased to have you here, and we hope that you'll find it most enjoyable whilst you're here.
Is that enough?
Yeah, that's plenty, that's fine. Just give it, hold it together. Okay, yes, okay there. Perfectly all right again. Just make sure it's wood when you use it.
Yeah, not metal.
Not metal. Okay.
Why not metal?
Well, it's the chance of setting it off with a spark. Take this.
Yeah.
And you push that in there. And you push it up firmly. Just firmly.
Can you feel it when you do it?
You feel it, it'll come to a stop.
You do your teeth much.
And you crimp that up tight and firm.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we push this in here.
Right.
Gentle, gentle.
You've got to be really firm, but not
and then you
too...
just squeeze that down a bit, make sure she doesn't come out.
Right.
Okay. And there it is. This is the sort of stuff you want to use if you say you've got a line of generators or something like that, and you want to put a charge in each one.
Yeah,
have them all go off together.
And you use this to sort of...
Yeah, this spans the gap between each explosion.
What was you telling me before about how fast this stuff travels, this cortex?
Oh, 23,000 kilometres in an hour. About, it'd be several thousand feet a second. Yeah. So it's an explosion. Now we'll put a hole in it like this.
Yep.
And then you insert the cortex through the hole.
So it's just like threading it all up?
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you're doing, isn't it?
Hello, Paula. It's Ray. I'm at the Hutt River province. Yeah, with that guy, Prince Leonard, you know, that one that set up his own country? Yeah, some loophole or something. He's designed the ultimate capitalist state, you know, based on tourism, synthetic economy and everything. He wants it to be like Singapore or Macau or Liechtenstein or some joint like that. Anyway, what's happening? There's a photograph of me in the paper taken by you. Where? The Australian Centre for Photography? What the fuck? What were you doing showing this stuff? You become an unconscious agent of the state, eh?
No, it's not just photographers. Can't end here, right, with our images being used against us.
As I see it at the moment, we're caught in a vicious circle. Any attempt at political action through our work is immediately co-opted. There's no way of producing politically effective cultural goods. The context is controlled to allow the revolutionary elements to expend themselves within the underground or avant-garde, giving the corporate and state apparatus the freedom to get on with decisions that control the way we live and ultimately the way we relate to each other. I've been looking at ways of converting the situation to retaliate. Our material goes directly into the system, within their context, and our meaning then becomes theirs.
can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't see it, it's invisible. And then 15 years later or 20 years later, the doctor says, well, you've got a cancer.
The nuclear scientists and uranium mining companies dismiss fears like that as simply alarmist. Many eminent Australians agree with Sir Philip Baxter that Australia is duty-bound to export its uranium for atomic fuel. Sir Philip says that unless we do, we'll suffer too much from the opprobrium of world opinion. Opprobrium, that's his word, his euphemism for saying that Australia will join the nuclear club if it knows what's good for it. The former chief of the Australian Atomic Energy Commission heads the lobby in this country that insists we mine our uranium reserves and inevitably build our own nuclear power stations. The next step, Sir Philip says, is to make our own bomb.
No one likes us, I don't know why. We may not be perfect, but heaven knows we try. But all around, even our old friends put us down. Let's drop the big one and see what happens. We give them money, but are they grateful? No, they're spiteful and they're hateful. They don't respect us, so let's surprise them. We'll drop the big one, pulverize them.
That's the way it goes if people like Sir Philip Baxter have their way. If the uranium miners, the stockholders, the government ministers have their way. Australia has 380,000 tons of known uranium reserves, about 20% of the known reserves in the world outside the Soviet Union and China. Within 10 years, Australia could be annually earning thousands of millions of dollars if it decides to export uranium. It would earn us more than either the wool or wheat industries. Whether or not to export was a decision left to a three-man judicial inquiry headed by Mr. Justice Fox, whose report, the Fox report, has given the federal government the go-ahead to mine and export if it can satisfy a series of exacting safeguards.
My first reaction was that they seemed to have done a rather thorough job of describing the numerous very serious risks of nuclear power and reporting all of the studies that have shown it to be absolutely unnecessary and in fact something that only a silly country would do. And then they draw the incredible conclusion from it that Australia ought to go ahead and export uranium because people are likely to go ahead with this technology. It is indeed likely to destroy civilization, but Australia ought to make a profit on it if civilization is be destroyed. So it seems to me it's a sort of term paper that I would have flunked a student on because they clearly had the information at hand and then drew the completely wrong conclusion from the information they had. There are other serious difficulties. It's become clear that other developed countries like Japan and the United States, where the public is aware of the problems with nuclear power and where there is a great deal of resistance to the siting of nuclear power plants, to the siting of waste disposal areas, of reprocessing plants and so on, are now intending to try and get Australia not only to export their uranium, but of course to take back the waste, to do reprocessing, to do enrichment. In other words, they feel that the Australian government is probably foolish enough to accept all these risks. And so basically countries like Japan and the United States will now attempt, if Australia goes down this path, to export all the problems of nuclear, many of the problems of nuclear power back to Australia.
Asia's crowded, Europe's too old, Africa's far too hot and Canada's too cold, and South America stole our name. Let's drop the big one, there'll be no one left to blame us. We'll save Australia, don't want to hurt no kangaroo. We're building all-American amusement park there. They got circuit too. Goes London, Paris, more room for you and more room for me. And every city, the whole world round, is just another American town.
Shut that off. The bottom's dropped completely out of the pressure system. Punch it up in the monitor. We're trying, sir. The electrical system's cut out. Transfer to main control board. hell is going on up there?
We've lost the primary cooling system.
All of it?
It's gone. There's no pressure.
Go to the emergency cooling system.
G'day, how are you? Ray, this is Jim. This is the editing setup I was telling you about. Jim's going to show you how to work the machine.
Sir, core temperature's at 1,000. If it goes to 2,500, you'll lose it all.
Sir, something's wrong with the emergency system. We can't get more than 30% water pressure.
That's impossible. Core temperature's at 1450 degrees.
Select the edit point. Pause. Pre-roll both machines.
Nancy, it's impossible. Check your numbers.
30%. Commander, there are 14 men still in that containment building. Now, you've got to open the doors. There are gases in there.
Yancey, check those numbers again.
1,600 degrees.
Sir, Proteus transmission.
Secretary of Defense is on the line.
Mr. Secretary, this is Commander. Yes, sir. I'm afraid so, sir. 14 men. We were scheduled to change the fuel rods tomorrow, sir. No, sir. If we lost what's left of the cooling system, sir, the heat would melt the fuel rods right through the bottom of the reactor, sir. The China syndrome. Yes, sir. If there were an explosion, a radioactive cloud would develop, sir.
Australian Atomic Energy Commission's research establishment
threatened that it wouldn't restart the reactor because there were not sufficient staff to monitor radioactive levels. Well, that situation has now been remedied, but the union still maintains that other monitoring equipment is either below standard or just not working. Mark Hamlin reports.
In capitalist societies, the ideological state apparatus is so strong and pervasive that it completely controls people's ideas. The key problem for the revolutionary terrorists today is the destruction of this ideological domination. One thing we can do to get at Hollywood, the ABC, and the news media in general is to bootleg their material and rework it to our own ends, to remake fact and fiction.
I've got a few ideas I've been working on.
What are you going to do?
If we can just take the case off, I'll give you an idea of what I've got in mind. So we put a bit of this stuff in here. And we lay the charge. That's it, isn't it?
At the proper time and in the proper place and in the proper manner, I could get away with murder.
Put this, play this videotape in a machine inside a computer center. When the tape gets to the position of the explosion which is on the tape, which is the scene, a magnetic field will be created, and this will wipe all the memory of the tapes in the installation.
They're currently making a videotape at night in Sydney University without authorization. Information transferred by a senior lecturer in architecture. No grounds for concern. Secure collection of tape throughout photographic channel number 1. The revolutionary intellectual appears first of all and above all else as a traitor to his class of origin. The first and only datum that is furnished him is rebellion. Stripped of all knowledge, driven to commit murder or to consent to it, he possesses this single datum which gains greater strength from his anguish. Rebellion arises from the spectacle of the irrational, coupled with an unjust and incomprehensible condition. But its blind impetus clamors for order in the midst of chaos, and for unity in the very heart of the ephemeral. It protests, it demands, it insists that the outrage comes to an end. Its aim is to transform, but to transform is to act. And to act nowadays is to kill, while it still does not know if murder is legitimate. Hence, it's absolutely necessary that rebellion derives its justification from itself, since there's nothing else to derive it from. It must consent to study itself in order to learn how to act.
The Australian Atomic Energy Commission's research establishment at Lucas Heights, Sydney, employs 396 technicians. By world standards, that makes it a fairly Mickey Mouse atomic affair. Nevertheless, both the federal government and the Commission have always insisted that when it came to safety standards, the Lucas Heights plant ranked with the world's big-timers. And so far, events have mostly borne the official view out, although there have been occasional hiccups. A few years ago, the Commission and the government paid out in a compensation case where a former employee contacted leukemia. In their own words, the Commission was far from happy with the decision to pay out and never accepted that the employee's disease was induced by work at the plant. There is one significant group at Lucas Heights not buying the official line, the union that represents the 280 professionals in the key technical posts. According to the Association of Architects, Engineers, Surveyors and Draftsmen, safety procedures are beginning to wilt under the effect of the federal government's economy drive. More particularly, the association claims that monitoring equipment used to check radiation picked up by workers at the plant is out of date and working significantly below standard.
You know, the fact that we hadn't tested the emergency cooling systems, that we hadn't tested the containment systems, that we were having pipe failures and sparger failures and instrument failures and cracks and corrosion and radioactive buildup of the plants to the point where you could hardly maintain them. And it just seemed to me there had to be a better way to make electrical power than to continue beating on this dead horse.
We've heard about the frailties of human error, the potential holocaust of a natural disaster. What about nuclear terrorism? Not the kind already practiced by the major powers, but by small, determined bands of guerrillas. If terrorist groups can kidnap the OPEC ministers, they'd have little trouble attacking reactors or the tens of thousands of truck shipments of radioactive waste.
The pigs attempt in their psychological conduct of the war to turn the facts which the guerrilla actions have made obvious on their heads.
Frankie is so desperate.
That it is not the people who depend on the state, but the state which depends on the people. It's not the people who need firms, multinationals and their factories, but the capitalists who are dependent on the people. The aim of the police is not to protect the people from criminals, but to protect the exploitive imperialist order from the people. The people don't need the judiciary, but the judiciary needs the people. We don't require the presence of American troops and bases here, but US imperialism requires us.
Frankie, pick up a gun.
Through personalisation and psychologisation, they project onto us what they are, the cliches of a capitalist anthropology. Its images, its judges, its fascist thugs. The policeman who is satisfied in his alienation, who lives only by torturing, lying, brutalising, elbowing a career, and by the exploitation of the people of the third world and here.
Frankie, look at his wife. Shut up. Oh, what have I done? Let's hear it for Frankie. Frankie, teardrop. Frankie with a going to say it. I know it! Frankie's dead.
Thanks to 2JJ for the nuclear trap by Roger Allabone and Carl Tyson Hall. Thanks to Bob Juniper and Stephen Tandy and everybody else who helped. Good night from Night Shift.